Good morning and welcome to Morning Scoop for Tuesday, July 27th. This is your daily Buckeye fix. I'm Tom Orr. The Minnesota game is in 37 days, the game against Michigan in 123 days. We are also exactly 1 week from the start of fall camp for the Buckeyes. That will open next Tuesday, August 3rd. And as we start ramping up into preseason coverage, one of my favorite features just returned to the Ask the Insiders board at Buckeye Scoop. It's called What I Know, What I Think, What I Wonder, and it is written by Buckeye Scoop beat reporter Tony Gerdeman. He joins me this morning. Tony, you had 16 separate items in there. We're only going to touch on about 5 of them. The first one involves the quarterback position. While it definitely is not ideal to have 0 college passing attempts between all the guys on the roster, write that down. That's good information. You also said you know for a fact that Ohio State's offense is just about the perfect situation for an unproven quarterback. So why is that?
Well, just look around. And the first thing that I know everybody wants to talk about the skill players and the receivers and Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson. But unless the quarterback has time to throw the ball to those guys, then those guys don't mean as much. And so when you have a brand new quarterback or, a young quarterback, unproven, who can drop back and know that he's got left tackle Thayer Munford, right tackle Nicholas Petit-Frere, and enough talent on the interior offensive line to give him time to get the ball where it needs to be, like that alone is going to give him confidence. He won't be rushing too much. He won't be looking to bail out. He will be trusting his offensive line. He won't have to look to his left or his right. He can stay and keep his eyes downfield. And then, when he does look downfield, gosh, you've got Jeremy Ruckert, you've got Chris Olave, you've got Garrett Wilson, you've got Jackson Smith and Jigba, Julian Fleming, Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka. Half of these guys are 5 stars. The other half should have been. And so there's plenty of options for him to throw to. Then you go to the running game, which is, I mentioned the offensive line, so there's going to be plenty of blocking for the running game. The talent will work itself out. I don't think anybody doubts the Ohio State running game and that it won't be effective. And so then you get the running game effective. That opens up the play action. There's no reason to think, or there's no reason that I don't know what a better situation would be other than J.K. Dobbins returning at running backs, that sort of thing. And so, but for just for what Ohio State has and the inexperience at quarterback, that quarterback, while they need him to make plays, they don't need him to make all of the plays. They just need him to get the ball to the right guys, and he can. And just being able to focus on getting the ball to the right guys will be a huge help because he, like I said, he won't have to worry as much about the defensive linemen.
Yeah, that is definitely a potential answer for Ohio State at one of the big positions of question going into the fall. Maybe it was a little less encouraging. One of your notes about the linebackers, one of the other positions where they're replacing a whole bunch and basically starting from scratch. You never really get totally straight answers at those media days events, so there's always some reading between the lines involved there. But you said you wonder if you read too much into what Ryan Day had to say about the linebackers. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Well, and yeah, because he would mention the 3 seniors and Dallas Gant, Raj Mitchell, and Kayvon Pope. Then he would also mention the other guys, and I don't even know that he said the guys behind them. He was just going through this collective group of linebackers. Then when he did talk about the seniors, he said that they had been there for 3 years, which is actually, this is their 4th year now, and he said it's time for them to go in terms of making plays and solidifying things. And yet the fact that they haven't done it, and he called them young players, it tells you there's this level of, or tells me, maybe, as I said, maybe I'm reading between the lines, but he doesn't view them as seniors. In a sense, he views them as inexperienced players. And while you and I will talk on this show and Buckeye Weekly about how they're seniors, they've played a little bit here and there. When the head coach is calling them inexperienced players or young players or whatever adjective he wants to use, it tells you that there's this level of concern. They are not veterans in his mind. And this is a head coach who talks about his players need to play veteran. This group certainly needs to do that. And it doesn't seem like, I don't think he thinks they're there yet, or else maybe he would have been more, convincing or steadfast or less leading me into wondering.
Another thing that was a really interesting word to use. You talked about Jeremy Ruckert and a word he used to describe this season for him. And, when you hear guys using specific words that kind of jump out to you like, oh, I've heard that word a bunch. and it's an unusual word, it's usually because they're terms that are being used within the team. So what was it that Ruckert was saying about this season? What was he calling this season that really kind of jumped out to you?
Right. Jeremy Ruckert, who is now in his senior year, called this his terminal year. And, it took me back a second. And immediately, as soon as he said it, I felt like there's no reason for a college player to be talking about their senior year as being terminal unless it's some sort of message coming from the coaches about how this is your last chance. But I figured maybe it's just a one-off, but then he mentioned it again, another one or two times after that. So to me, that feels like a coaching message, like make the most of this season because it's your last. Now, is the verbiage terminal a little dark? Perhaps. Is it direct? Absolutely. And does it make the player think? It sure seems that way. And so it is an interesting one. I should have followed up with it, but I just felt like, do I really want to go down this alley? We're all in a good mood. Do I really want to start talking about, something being terminal here at the Big Ten Media Days?
Well, and then, in addition to words that you kind of hear consistently, sometimes it's players you hear about consistently, especially guys, yes, everyone's going to be talking about Chris Olave because Chris Olave is Chris Olave, but sometimes they're young guys who you haven't seen on the field yet, but you hear the name consistently often enough that it's like, okay, Nevada's got this guy mentioning this guy and some of his nuggets about who's really standing out during workouts. And, then you hear players talk about, hey, this guy's really been impressive. One of the freshman defensive tackles sounds like he's someone who's already getting a lot of attention already. Let people know who that was.
Yeah, Tyleek Williams, a big kid. Listen, I think 6'3", 330 pounds. Somebody that we heard about in the winter and in the spring, and he was a little banged up in the spring. But the fact that, a guy who's still a little bit banged up and you hear about him, that's also something to keep an eye on. But Zach Harrison, Ohio State junior defensive end, basically, said, yeah, he's raw, but there's a lot there to like. And once he puts it together, he's going to be really, really good. And he talked about his quick feet and, this is a big guy who can move, and that's kind of, if you're a big guy and you can move and you can take coaching as you have to if you're going to be playing at Ohio State under Larry Johnson, there's certainly a lot to like there. Now, as Zach Harrison said, he's raw, but this is also a deep group of defensive tackles. So how quickly does he get involved? I don't know, but it's just one of those things when you keep hearing a player's name from many different areas, be it coaches or teammates. The teammates one is always really interesting because they don't, they get asked about guys all the time, and sometimes, they're like, I don't know. But when they talk about guys unprompted, when teammates do, and they tell you what impresses them about them, then you certainly take notice. And Tyleek Williams, his name just keeps coming up, and it's for a reason. I'm sure it's not just because it's well, we got nothing else to talk about. Let's talk about Tyleek Williams. No. Like, people are talking about him because he's impressive and a big guy that can move, and there will soon be a spot on the defensive line for him, I think.
Yeah, he may not be, in that starting rotation this year or anything like that, but that's generally a pretty good indication. Like, maybe you're going to see him a little bit this year, and then 2022 he's in that rotation. In 2023, all of a sudden he's one of those guys who, is coming to Big Ten Media Days, perhaps. You also had an interesting note on something James Franklin said about NIL, and that was really interesting to hear all the different Big Ten coaches talk about NIL, and PJ Fleck couldn't wait to tell you how the Twin Cities are just unique. They're uniquely positioned to really capitalize on it, and Ryan Day talked about it, and a bunch of other coaches talked about this great opportunity of NIL. But what James Franklin said about NIL, you thought that might tell you something about the market for NIL in Central Pennsylvania.
Well, at first, let me start with what Pat Fitzgerald said about NIL and how coaches, he laughed and said, every coach right now is telling you how great their campus is set up for NIL. And it's a big joke, and you can't believe all of them. Maybe the one coach, Tom, that you can believe is James Franklin, because he said, well, when it comes to NIL, it's not really something they're going to be talking about in recruiting. Now, we know that our own Mark Givler has said, well, he's definitely talking to recruits about NIL. But if it's not something that they're really selling, then it's because there's nothing really there to sell. And so if like what he said that, and that was up at the front podium, I was like, whoa, that you've got nothing. Like there is not a lot there in that area of Pennsylvania. We know that. But if you're just going to ignore it, you're admitting defeat at that point.
Yeah, I mean, they're a uniquely positioned school where, I mean, it is really the middle of nowhere. There are two big cities in that state that have lots of pro teams and lots of pro athletes, and that's where all the population is. And State College is right in the middle of it, like 4 hours from everything, basically. And yeah, that you could see that becoming a little bit of a challenge in terms of, how much market really is there, and where the market is in Philadelphia. How much do they really care about Penn State football compared to, say, the Eagles or the Steelers in Pittsburgh? You could see that being a challenge. And he said that, and I kind of went, huh, because if everyone's telling you the same thing and then someone is saying something different, it's like, okay, well, that's interesting. Pat Fitzgerald, I think Pat Fitzgerald probably, there is money in the Northwestern community, but they call themselves Chicago's Big Ten team. I don't think they're right at the top of the heap of the number, the programs and teams that Chicago cares most about and probably are most marketable in Chicago. So that's it's probably a little telling that those two were the two of the ones who talked about that. There were 11 other notes in that column, including playoff expansion, Gene Smith's thoughts on expanding the Big Ten to Pac-12 territory, much more. All you have to do to get access to that is become a member of BuckeyeScoop.com. You can find that article on the front page. That link on the front page goes to our Ask the Insiders board, where we post much of our very, very good content. And so you should consider signing up to become a member of Buckeye Scoop today to be able to access that. If you want some more free content, Tony and I did a Buckeye Weekly episode that'll be dropping on Tuesday. Tony, let people know what we're going to be talking about on that one.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Oklahoma and Texas to the SEC, what that means for the Big Ten, what that means for Ohio State. Where does the Big Ten go from here? Where does maybe Ohio State go from here? And so that will be in your feeds. Probably should already be there.
Yeah, that'll be up probably Tuesday morning. So that'll be another good listen. I saw the numbers from Monday's Morning Scoop episode with Nevada talking about conference expansion. Apparently, you guys are interested in conference expansion, so that's cool. We'll talk more about conference expansion. Lots of very different conversation with Tony than with Nevada. Focusing more on what it means for Ohio State, what it means for the Big Ten, as opposed to kind of the why, the next level of that conversation. So I think you guys will enjoy that. But all you have to do is subscribe, find Buckeye Weekly and all of our great podcasts on whatever podcast platform you like. Just search Buckeye Scoop to find them. You can subscribe right there. You will find Buckeye Weekly, Morning Scoop, obviously you know about. But we have a lot of other great shows. Kirk Barton does Scoop World Order, has a ton of great guests on that show. Alex Gleitman does Around the Oval. He'll be dropping a new episode of that later on this week. Dom Smith does Beyond the Shoe. Mark Givler and Bill Green do the Gives in the Bank podcast, talking about recruiting. There's a ton of great content out there. It's all free. Just subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. And speaking of free, great content, youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. Subscribe right there. You get notified every time we put up a new video with a podcast, player interviews, and much more. youtube.com/Buckeye Scoop. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.